So yeah, eventually I reached a point in 2010 where I took the decision to leave everything I knew behind me. So I left my job, my family, friends,
That's big.
the dental practice, and
Yep.
I came on my own to the UK with two suitcases, in pursuit of a calling that I was feeling that this is the life that I am meant to have, much rather than the life that I had been living. So
Right. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, where we inspire and empower you to live your best audacious life ever. It's always a pleasure to have you here with us, and I'm truly grateful that you've taken the time out of your busy schedule to spend it here with us on the podcast. I was sort of thinking about a cool analogy for today's episode, and I came up with a one of glasses. Now, I don't wear them myself personally, but just imagine for a second life as a pair of glasses. Our beliefs acting as lenses for which we view the rest of the world. Now, sometimes these lenses can be limiting. Maybe they're dirty or steamed up, and that's going to have an impact because our view or perception of the world will be distorted, which in turn can hold us back from our true potential. It takes awareness and a willingness to clean off the glasses and question those beliefs to unlock our audacious selves. And today's guest, today's episode. We have the pleasure of speaking with Agi Keramidas, a true beacon of transformation and self-discovery. His journey from introvert to knowledge broker is a testament to the power of embracing curiosity and following your internal calling. He essentially cleaned off his glasses to become so much more than what he was. And he's here on the Audacious Living Podcast to share his wonderful story. Hey, Agi, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. It's a pleasure to connect with you like this, my friend. Thank you for being here.
Audley, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I'm looking forward to this conversation and the exchange of energy.
Absolutely, absolutely. We were talking just before we, press record live here, how much, appreciating the opportunity and the privilege to podcast, to share insights, learn, and to encourage others along the way. And so, if we can do that, I think, look, I'm excited already. So those are all good things. You're a podcaster yourself. Personal development is big to you. You've got your own personal story as well that got you to this place. And so maybe as a starting point, because we continually encourage this best audacious life here on this podcast, and what better way to do that than to share our own personal stories. So maybe as a starting point, I can get you to sort of fill our audience in a little bit about who you are and what got you to the point that you're at now.
Yes, sure. And I will try to blend it all in with the audacious living as well.
We'll make it work. I'm sure we will.
I am Greek originally. I lived in Greece until I was about 35 years old. I have studied to be a dentist, so I have practiced dentistry for over 20 years. When I was 35, around 35, I found myself living in my hometown, in the same place where my parents lived and I grew up, and living a life that was not that different than what they did. And I realized that that was not what was fulfilling for me, what was, it was not something that resonated with me. I felt, even though, on the outside, people will say, wow, you got everything going. I had my dental practice, I had friends, family, I was engaged to be married. On the outside, I had it pretty good. But on the inside, I felt empty. There was, not that feeling of internal satisfaction, of fulfillment. And long story short, and after a long deliberation, I took the decision, and I think that's also one lead into the audacious life, because I wanted to, with audacity, to do what I wanted to do rather than what my parents or my fiancé or society had guided me towards doing until that point. So yeah, eventually I reached a point in 2010 where I took the decision to leave everything I knew behind me. So I left my job, my family, friends,
That's big.
the dental practice, and
Yep.
I came on my own to the UK with two suitcases, in pursuit of a calling that I was feeling that this is the life that I am meant to have, much rather than the life that I had been living. So
Right.
uh, yeah, so that was, one of the, let's say, key defining moments that really changed my life. That was about 13 years
Okay.
ago. And yeah, I can move on and bring things more a bit closer to now, if you want, to the podcast and everything.
I'm curious. Was there a calling? What was it that brought you? Like, because sometimes we get to a point of that decision, and some instances we're pulled, and sometimes we're
Yes.
pushed. Right.
The opposite force, I think we all are very familiar with it. It's the word that starts with F, and it's fear. So
Mm,
that is the opposite force. However, I managed to deal with that because, and to answer your question, it was an internal calling. It was more an intuition. It was more, things happening and people coming into my life, or even messages reading in the newspaper about living abroad, or how good it is to be a dentist in England, or things like that, that started coming into my awareness like synchronistic events the moment I started thinking about it.
right.
And I found myself, and I think that's the important, I still remember that vividly. I would find myself at times daydreaming when I was doing something else, shaving. At that time, I didn't have a
Right.
beard. So I would
Right.
shave and daydream about how my life would be living in England. And I would have a
Yes.
big smile in my face. So
Wow.
it was an internal calling without knowing what exactly
Yes.
was it for me there. But
Yes.
it was quite clear that there was something
R-
drawing me
Right.
there.
Right.
Of
Right.
course, it was not easy, to decide and leave the familiar, the
Of
comfortable
course. Of
behind.
course.
Uh, but it was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my
Of course,
life.
I love that. I love that because I think oftentimes we're called to do all sorts of things. Things happen, and whether we paid attention to them or not, and I think we're getting messages. Every day we're getting messages, and what we choose to listen to.
Yes.
So just last, I'll admit, I like to snack. I like to have snacks at nighttime, right? I shouldn't, and I try not to, but every so often, and Aggie, I went and I took out a little package of cookies, and I opened it up and they fell to the floor. And I said, that's a sign I shouldn't have had it, right? You know what I mean? So it's a sign that we got to pay attention to, right? So you paid attention to cookies, right? Just like I did.
With the signs, there is an interesting thing that happens that initially the signs are small, like this. You will drop the cookie. When we ignore these small signs, these little taps on the shoulder, that the signs start becoming louder because,
Yes.
yeah. So it's I always pay attention, to small things, even if,
Sure.
if I bang my knee on the table or something similar like that.
Yes.
It is for me a reminder to get back into the present
Yes.
moment and realize, okay, what am I doing? Where am I
Yes.
lost? What is this trying to tell me? What can I change? Because I believe that everything happens for
They do.
a reason.
They do. They do. So something I need to understand, and I'm very interested in this part of your journey, because you formally describe yourself as an introvert.
Hmm.
You're no longer there. Help me understand sort of what happened that got you from, because those are two polar opposites, an introvert to someone who's now podcasting, speaking, and sharing messages to the world. Help me understand that journey, please.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. It was around 2015. I finished, when I was in England, I finished doing a master's degree in
Okay.
restorative dentistry. So I found again myself in a situation that I felt empty and unsatisfied. After a master's degree with a considerable cost and time investment, I would expect me to be fired up, to do this
Sure.
super things, but I didn't. I wasn't, and that really led me, because initially I thought there must be something wrong with me. That led me to an inner journey, a journey of self-discovery, personal development. That's when it
Yes.
all started for me, around 2015, 2016, when I realized that I need to do something different with my life. I can't be, doing stuff that feel like it's the next thing to do and then achieving it and not seeing any internal, fulfillment. And
Right.
to go to your specifically to your question about the introvert, that personal development journey led me to a very specific moment in time. I call it my light bulb moment. It
Okay.
happened during a Tony Robbins event in London back in 2017
Okay.
with 10,000 people around me, where I realized at that particular time that all my life until then, I was, as you say, an introvert. I will actually describe that a little bit more rather than giving it just a vague, word of introvert.
Hmm.
Specifically, what I was very reserved in social situations, uncomfortable speaking to people. I was very shy. I wouldn't speak my words out.
Okay.
And all my life until that day at the Tony Robbins event, I always thought that this is who I am. This is my character. This is my personality. So it was only at that time when I realized that it was not an indelible part of me as I had led to myself to believe up to that day. Instead, I realized very clearly on that particular occasion that it was a limiting belief, or if you want, a voice in the back of my head, in my internal dialogue,
Hmm.
that every time that I was encountering, someone I didn't know or a social setting, that voice would start telling me, Agi, people do not care of what you have to say. And I was not aware of that. I mean, it was always there pretty much all my life, but I was not aware of them. It was, playing in the subconscious and affecting
Right.
my decisions. And at that time, I realized that for what it was. And that really made me realize that I don't want to live the rest of my life like this. I know that I have value inside of me. I know that there are people who are going to listen to what I have to say, and they
Yes.
have been. And as a result, I really very quickly afterwards took the steps to change that. So I enrolled into a public speaking course, and then later on, not so much later, probably around a year afterwards, I started my first podcast because I started doing things in the other direction.
Yes.
So that's in a nutshell the story or the moment of how it shifted the other side from being close to myself and scared to speak to people,
Yes.
walking on stage and speaking in front of 50 people. That was my first speech. And then starting a podcast where you really don't know who's going to listen and when.
Yes.
So
Yeah, or what they're going to think, or and
exactly.
any of those sorts of things. And so that's wonderful, and I love the fact that you recognizing that the shyness was a limiting belief and it was holding you back, and it's like, okay, so let's break out of that. So that's wonderful. Do you recognize that former person? Do you recognize that former self?
It's a great question that you ask me now, and sometimes I look at him like a distant relative. Someone, it's yeah, I
Right.
don't really recognize. I know that I was that person, but it doesn't feel like that at all. It feels like it was in a different life or a different reality or timeline, if you want. I don't
Yes.
know how to explain it better, but yeah, I have changed very much
I love
since
it.
that
I
time.
love it. And I know one of the your sort of principal themes are really about sort of standing up and standing out and not just conforming. Is that sort of part of your messaging and your journey when you talk about what you want people to do?
Definitely, and in my podcast, Personal Development Mastery, that's the phrase I always end up with: stand out, don't fit in, because in a way it resembles or reminds me also of my own journey. All my life I was trying to fit in
Yeah.
so that I wouldn't expose myself, to other people's judgment. What if they didn't like what I had to say? So and I think unfortunately the majority do exactly that. They try to fit in, and that is very restrictive, and I think in many ways it is a disservice to what we can do with our life and what we can offer to other
Yeah.
people by keeping things for ourselves,
Yes.
trying to fit in, trying not to expose ourselves to criticism from others,
Yeah.
whereas standing out, and I don't mean it in any arrogant way, standing out. I mean it very
Yeah.
simply. Stand out for me means be truly who you are. So if your genuine, your authentic self is this, a thing, whatever that is, that's what I mean by standing out. Be that. That immediately makes you stand out because you are actually following who
Yes.
you are, what you do, your calling, your path,
Yeah.
your purpose,
Yes.
if you want.
Uh, Yeah. So as you're saying that, purpose is exactly the thing that came to mind. Like when you're standing up, and I do appreciate you providing the explanation that it's not to be arrogant or cocky or better than. It's
Mm,
being who you truly are meant to be. Right. Because at the end of the day, we all have our own unique gifts, skills, and abilities that we were given. And it's the onus is on us to use those and exercise those and bring and put those to the world. And when we're not doing that, then we're not standing out. We are actually fitting in and conforming. And so I think it's a really, really significant point. It certainly is relevant to this podcast when we talk about how you be audacious, and it's not by fitting in.
definitely. And I think it is our duty to stand out and be audacious and do what we are driven from within to do. We have to. It is our duty. That's how I see it.
Yes, yes, yes. No, so you describe yourself as a knowledge broker. I wonder if you can elaborate further on what that means.
Of course, yes. A knowledge broker, from my point of view, let me take it back one step here and state the fact that the era that we live in is an era where there is abundance of information. We never had so much information. Pretty much
Yes.
the whole of human knowledge is on our fingertips,
Wow.
literally. However, at the same time, while we drown in this information, at the same time we starve for wisdom because all the information is out there. But go figure, what can you do with it? What can you really do with all this information? So it is very important, and that is my role as a knowledge broker in the way that I see knowledge broker being, is take that wisdom, or at least not all of it, but that portion that I am familiar with and I have studied and know about, and take that information and
Yes.
distill it in a way, crystallize it into specific insights, wisdom.
Yes. Yes.
Something that, someone listening to a conversation or reading my book won't say, oh, this was a lovely conversation, great concepts, theoretical, I had a good half an hour, and then carry on doing whatever I was doing before.
Right.
No, for
Right.
me, it is all about transformation. It's about giving some kind of inspiration or insight, if you want, to take action, because that's really what propels change. You can listen to 1,000 podcasts and read one even more books. If you don't actually do what it is that you read there or listen to, it doesn't really make any
Right.
improvement in your
Right.
life. So knowledge broker is, for me, taking all that um, sea of knowledge and information and distilling it into something practical, something actionable, something that one can if they resonate with, take
Sure.
it and implement it. I
Sure.
hope that that gives you a better understanding of how
No,
I
it,
mean
it,
it.
it does, and I really your point around what we do with his knowledge once we acquire it, it really resonates with me because I mean, quite frankly, if I'm going to read a book and it's got all kinds of great stuff, and I'm going to put the book down and not do any of this stuff, I might as well not have read the book. It's like why did I read it? Certainly, you could say, well, it's for insights, information, whatever. But if the book has given me something, Aggie, this is what I can use for you. Take this, and if you don't use it, then I think you wasted an opportunity, and so that's why I really wanted to. I think that's a really, really good point there. Um, personal growth is around us all the time, right? It's at our disposal, and as you just finished saying, the information age that we're in, it's just at a whole other level. And it does present some challenges when we've got that much information at our disposal, particularly when it comes to figuring out what our individual purpose is. I wonder if you've got some insights or some thoughts as to the strategies or approaches around how individuals can discover their own purpose.
Absolutely. Thank you for this question, Audley. The first thing I will note is the way that you asked the question, and it is the phrase discover the purpose. There are many ways we can describe this. Many people say find my purpose. I have a big issue with saying how can I find my purpose, because that implies that it's somewhere and you are looking for it to find it, like it's like a rock waiting somewhere to be discovered. Purpose is not like that. It's not waiting for us. Purpose is something that we create with our action, with what we do every day, with our life. That is our purpose. It is, rather than finding it, a much better word is creating, or like how you compose a poem or a
Yeah.
song. It is
Yeah.
like that. So to answer your question and give you something more practical than that, there is that phrase that say follow your bliss. It's a beautiful phrase. I think it was Joseph Campbell that was talking about that, but
Okay.
I will say something different, maybe even simpler than that, because
Okay.
bliss is beautiful, but how many of us really know what our bliss is to follow it? So let's start with something more easily accessible than bliss, and that is curiosity.
Ah.
What is it that you are intrigued about? You have some keen interest in. Maybe you haven't really explored it,
Yep.
but it occupies your mind, or you have a smile when you think about it. Maybe it
Yes.
is
Yes.
cooking. I don't know. Maybe it is
Yep.
whatever it might be, podcasting, whatever it might be.
Could be. Yeah.
So for me, the recommendation or the invitation, better word, the invitation I would offer to someone listening to us now and wondering, how can I, go towards this path of discovering, as you said, or creating or connecting with
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
purpose. And my invitation is do something that you are intrigued about, that you are curious about. Take some action. I love the phrase joyous exploration. There is
Ah.
something you don't really know much about it, but you explore it and you feel good about it. Because if you don't, I would say obviously that's not it. Let's look at something else.
Right.
But that's
Right.
the good thing about following your curiosity, that if something is really not for you, you will feel resistance. You will know that,
Yes.
oh my God, this is a drag. That I don't want to be doing that. But then because you've tried it. And then you
Yes.
do something else. I remember, and I will take a little break after that and let you, if you want to add. But I remember when I recorded my very first podcast,
Okay.
back in August 2018, the very first episode.
Okay.
Afterwards, for the remainder of the day, I had a buzz. I was so elated, so overjoyed, so full
I
of
love it.
energy
I love
And
it.
we had just recorded. I was with a co-host. We were doing a different
Yeah,
podcast at that time,
yeah,
and
yeah.
you had just recorded, an episode. But for me, the way that I felt afterwards, it was impossible to ignore because it felt so good.
Amazing.
So I think that's the path, or maybe one path. Maybe I don't dare to say it is the path, but one path towards exploring and connecting with the purpose. Follow your curiosity.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a big fan of curiosity. I do some coaching as well, and in the coaching space, we talk about curiosity as a way or a means of suspending judgment. Right? If you're always asking questions, if you remain inquisitive, the judge, you don't have time to form judgments because you're questioning them at the same time. And so, when you expand that to the discovery or creating of your purpose, right? Creating purpose. I learned from you. If just creating our purpose, then using that curiosity, it's such a very nice fit as I see it, and so I think it's a beautiful way of going there. I think openness, I say open-minded, but certainly openness or awareness is also big aspects of discovery of our purpose, because there are times when our purpose may change. We might
Mm.
find something and go, this is what it is, and maybe that's what it was for the moment, but as life evolves, so do we. And our purpose very well also could evolve into something else. And so the open mindedness and the awareness of that, I think, are also important points.
Definitely, especially you said the awareness, and that's I think it's very important, extremely important, the awareness. And what do we mean by saying awareness? From my understanding, awareness is to know at
Mm-hmm.
any given point whether you are aligned in
Yes.
your thoughts, your actions, whether they are aligned with your purpose. Since we're talking about purpose, it could be other things, but that awareness regarding to purpose is
Yes.
this kind of knowing that what I'm doing right now, this conversation that I'm having right now, and it
Mm-hmm.
definitely is for me aligned with my purpose. So the thing with awareness is that not everyone can have it, but it needs to be cultivated. It's not us, we have never been, or again, I don't like using words like never, they're very absolute, but
Absolutely. Yeah. I know what you mean. I know what you
most
mean.
most of us, and let's say I will make an assumption here, most of the people listening right now have uh, anyway, I'm starting to go to a different direction and I'm losing my train of thought. So I will let you bring me back to wherever you want to continue.
No problem. But I do that sometimes because there's so much good stuff out there. Yeah, it's not our
Sure.
fault. There's too much knowledge out there, Aggie. That's what it comes down to, Aggie. There's too much knowledge that we got to deal with, and so I get it. I understand. I've absolutely been there. I actually kind of want to go back because it's something I thought of and I wanted to touch on. When you left for the UK,
Yeah.
you left your entire life behind.
Mhm.
You started from scratch.
Yeah, I had a job, all right. So
Right.
I had found a job while I was in Greece, so I didn't go,
Sure.
but yeah,
But you are starting
apart
from
from that,
scratch,
yeah,
essentially. You relocated your whole life.
absolutely.
Were there people that questioned you? What was that like? Because here's the thing. Here's the thing. The way I see it, when you're driven, so you're following your intuition, it said this is where you must go because there's something better for you. And as you said, it's the best decision you ever made, right? But this is where you must go because it's your calling. Others can't see it. So
Mm.
on the outside, they're wondering, what's he doing? Like, life is good. Why is he throwing this away? Why is he taking that kind of chance? What was happening in your world in that regard?
I was either because I was lucky or I'm not sure how deliberately I did it at that time, but isolated myself as much as I could from the people that would not be supportive of me. So,
Okay.
I wouldn't discuss it with them, obviously.
Understood.
I was very lucky and blessed, actually, that my parents were very supportive of my decision,
Yep.
because that really, gave wind under my wings. It's when you
Yes.
have
Yes.
all the world against you, it's
Yes.
more difficult. It can still be done if that's what your determination is, but yeah, it can be easier, when you have support from people who love you and people who are close
Yes.
to. So yeah, I didn't have to face
Oh,
that
okay. Good.
very much, and as I said, to some extent it was deliberate. To some other point, I was lucky to avoid it until I didn't have to anymore, because my actions would speak for themselves, and there
Gotcha.
wouldn't be any judgment, afterwards, because I had already proven that, I did it.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I was curious about that because sometimes, we run into the obstacles, and those obstacles are from the people that are closest to us, right? And they present the biggest challenges. So yeah, and you were engaged, you said too. So your fiance,
My fiancée was the opposite. She was not supportive because she didn't want to move. She
understands.
wanted to live her life there, close to her family, with her job, which was familiar and secure and comfortable. Uh, yeah, and that was really well. We had to break up when I left
Sure.
because she would not follow. So there was friction from there, but
Sure.
the most from me, was that when you are with someone and there is this sadness that your paths will
Sure.
split because you want different things. I'm sure that anyone that has been through a separation of a serious relationship can
Yep.
relate to how that
Yep.
feels.
Yeah, no, I get you, and I think that's giving you more credit for making such a big move in face of all the things that you had to do. Like you had to make some serious decisions, and so I applaud you even that much more because of that.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, we talked earlier about sort of the limiting beliefs that you had around your shyness, and I think for a lot of people, those are very natural. That's like they're built into almost ingrained that we have these beliefs. Where they came from initially, who knows? It could be a bunch of different reasons. They could come from anywhere, but nonetheless, they're here now in front of us. In some instances, they're part of our subconscious, if you will, and there's some work that we need to do to almost reprogram in a sense,
Hmm.
right? To change that. Sort of thoughts on best approaches for reprogramming our subconscious.
It's a complicated topic, but what I will say about limiting beliefs, and there is, when you think about limiting beliefs, the problem is that it is very an abstract concept. Okay, what is a
Yep.
limiting belief? And
Yep.
even if you think about it, it is in the subconscious. It's not often clearly visible. So there is a great analogy that I think when I describe about limiting beliefs, and that is lenses, like the spectacles that
Yeah. Yeah.
I wear. So if we assume that these lenses are the limiting beliefs, that means that everything that I see, everything I perceive, is filtered through these lenses, and because I
Yes.
wear them all the time, I'm used to it, and I do believe that the world is exactly as I see it, because that's how I'm used to see it. The thing is, and that's the good analogy about the lenses, that the lenses have another characteristic, that they are designed in such a way that you don't notice them.
Right.
So you look through them, so you don't really pay attention when you wear glasses or contact lenses. You don't pay attention to that, to the lens. You look through it and you perceive things as you perceive through them. So to answer your question, I think the first step to reprogram, before we even talk about reprogramming and changing limiting beliefs, the first step is to become aware. And there we go, talking about awareness again, to become aware of the limiting beliefs, which is, the equivalent of looking at your glasses, at
Right.
the
Right.
lens for a moment, to realize that, oh, wait a minute, everything I'm looking through that. And then we can start, exploring maybe where it came from, or how to change it. But the very first step is to become aware of beliefs, thought patterns,
Right.
habits, emotional patterns, anything that might be there that keeps us or prevents us from, doing the thing, whatever it is that we want to do. It can be a very, big thing like the purpose that we were talking, or it could be a very simple thing like, going and asking that girl out when you are.
Right.
It's
Right.
still
Right.
it's still
Right.
the same process happening
Yes.
inside your mind that makes you take one decision or the other
Yes.
decision.
Yes. 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 So it's a matter of thinking it through and understanding the thoughts that are getting. And I love the analogy of the glasses and the spectacles, right? Because that's what we see. And so it's really critical to take glasses off, right? And sort of give yourself another viewpoint, right? So I love that. Now that is one of the sort of topics in your book. I understand that you speak to, and you'll give me the title again. It's 88 Actionable Insights
88
for Life.
Actionable Insights for Life.
Right.
Yes, thank you. Yes,
Yes.
it's a book that has come directly, like 90% plus, it has come directly from previous episodes of my podcast and conversations I had with,
Yes.
these exceptional people that I had the
Yes.
privilege to speak with
Yes.
over the years.
I love it. I love it. Why 88? It's a unique number. I'm sure there's a story behind that.
Yes, there is a story about it. Initially, when I got the idea for the book, I thought I'm going to write 100 because it's
Okay.
nice and round. Let's go for
Sure.
100. At that time, my title was 100 Personal Development Tips. That's I thought this is a nice and catchy title.
Yeah.
Eventually, the 88 happened. I was drawn to the eights for many
Okay.
different reasons. Some other things that I had done. For example, one thing I remember now is that my first podcast finished at episode 87.
Oh,
87.
okay.
So that was one thing. Then I thought at some point, also, when you look at the eight flat on its back and not upside down, it's like the symbol of infinity. So there are
Yes.
like two.
Yes.
So there were
Yes. Okay.
many, symbols and
Yes.
things that were coming to me. And then at some point I thought, this is it. I have to do it. 88. There is no need. Oh,
Mm.
actually, I remember also there was another thing. I had said initially I will do 100, and there was a point I was struggling to reach 100, and I thought,
Ah.
what can I do to make them 100? And then, wait a minute, why do I have to do 100?
Right.
And that's when all of that came together with the 88
Yes.
as a number.
Good. Good. I love the fact that you question why do I have to do 100. Well, and I mean that because I think it's a really good practice of questioning things, right? Like sometimes we have things in our mind as to how it should be. We don't know how it got there. We just determine that's what it is. And even if it's not serving us, even if it's not helping
Yes.
us, we're like, this is what it is. And it's not until we start to question, like, okay, I don't need to do this. So I love that. I love that. I love that. And the last thing I wanted to ask you, tell us about your podcast. Over 400 episodes. That's awesome. From one podcast to the next, I congratulate you because that is a big deal.
Likewise, I will extend also the
Thank you.
congratulations because you are also a prolific
Thank you.
podcaster. So respect to each other. Yes, thank you for asking. My podcast is Personal Development Mastery. Uh, my intention with the podcasting, we were talking briefly about that before we started recording, and we noticed, the similarities between us, even though there are some nuances there,
Sure.
but the similarity is that and what I intend to do with my podcast and the book also is to provide with the listener or the reader with that insight, that inspiration to take some kind of action. Because
Yes.
personal development, we were talking about that earlier on, it's about implementing.
Yes.
It's not about knowledge. It's
Yes.
about implementation. That's the way that we get better. That's the way to self-growth. That's the way to personal mastery.
Yes.
And the podcast I was saying earlier, that it started for me as a joyful exploration, as I was saying, and then very quickly it became a passion of mine, and
Yes.
at some point it became a mission, because this is, I can't imagine myself not doing the podcast. So my aim and intention is to reach 1,000 episodes at least.
I love it. I love it. I love it. That's awesome. That's a wonderful goal, and you'll get there, and you'll look back on the journey and have so much appreciation for what you've done. So congratulations. This has been such a delightful conversation. I do thank you for being here. For our listeners that want to learn more about you or check out get a copy of your book or listen to your podcast, where can we send them?
Certainly, thank you. First of all, the podcast is Personal Development Mastery, so you can find it wherever you listen to your podcasts for. And as for my book, I will actually, Audley, offer the book, the electronic version of the book, as a gift to your listeners.
Okay.
So you can go to my website, agikeramidas.com/88. And then you can download a free copy of the ebook. And I'm hoping that in there you will find even, one action that you will resonate with and take, and hopefully change your life. Because it's all about, small things done consistently that change and improve one's life. Thank you.
I love it. Listen, I appreciate that, and I'll ensure to make sure in the show notes that we make that accessible for our listeners to be able to
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevens.
Such a blast. Really appreciate this. I had a lot of fun, and I so love your story. It's funny. Like I think of myself, and I said, would I ever get up one day and leave my home where it's comfortable and safe and off on something? And I'm not convinced I would. I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm being right. So I'm talking about being audacious, right? And I'm still have my own. So it's the whole thing. I talk about the things that I know, and I promote the things I know, and I encourage what I know, and I know that it's not an easy thing. But it's a rewarding if you allow it and receive them as such, and you definitely have. So thank you for this. Thank you for the time. Congratulations, and all the best, my friend.
Thank you very much, Audley, and you too, my friend.
Agi, for being here and sharing in the wonderful, open, transparent manner that he did. So I appreciate you for doing so, and thank you. One key takeaway from our conversation with Agi is that is the importance of becoming aware of our limiting beliefs. By recognizing these internal barriers, we can begin the process of reprogramming our subconscious minds and unlocking these new possibilities. As you continue on your audacious journey in life, I remember that small actions taken consistently can lead to significant changes. Stay curious and stay aware, and always be open to growth. And again, that's what will put you on that path to living that audacious life. Keep embracing audacity in all that you do. And until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.